We have been coming from different directions in response to what happened yesterday. Would love to get an unbiased opinion on this one. Andrew Zacchecko joins us. Andrew, good morning. How you doing?
Hey, good morning. I'm great. How's everybody doing?
We're doing good. It's been a strange show because it is a victory Monday in which they won, but it wasn't pretty. So first things first, before we even start asking you specific questions, the floor is yours to give your reaction to what happened in New Orleans yesterday.
Well, I thought that game, Andrew, really best encapsulated the Eagles' ability to persevere. When you look at the coaching lapses, the injuries, the turnovers, the punt block in the second half, I just think that those, when you put all those together, there's no way, at least in theory, that a team should be able to win that game. But I thought, starting from the quarterback, the running back, the tight end, I thought their key players in that game really stepped up in the winning moments of that game, and they had to have a situation. And that to me was the big storyline. But you have to tip your hat to Vic Fangio and that Eagles defense, always surrendering 12 points to the Saints. It was a masterful game plan from Fangio. I think he deserves the game ball, and they were playing inspired football. And I think that if without their performance, obviously, they wouldn't be in that game.
When you think of last year and the problems this team had, and then you look at this team through 3 weeks, why do you tell people this year might just be different?
That's a game that they lose last year, John. I think you can agree with that.
I would agree.
When things aren't going your way and they start to snowball, the Eagles found a way to make it work. There's the buy-in. It was a motivated team. I mentioned to you guys last week how that locker room was on Monday night when they lost that game. It was quiet. They took umbrage with it, and they knew what they needed to do to win and take it to the Saints on Sunday. There was never any semblance of complacency there. It was just a different vibe, whereas last season it just never quite felt right. To me, this is an inspired, motivated team, and I can't emphasize enough, this is a different locker room. Well, this roster has largely been turned over. So I think the messaging is resonating, and the players are fully bought in, and they're playing for one another, and you saw that because this is a game that would easily have slipped away last season.
Now, Andrew, I'm not in a good place today. All right, I'm being honest with you. I'm not in a good place. I'm not in a good place today, even though the Eagles won the football game yesterday. Part of the reason, and look, I'm trying not to compare this year to last year because the circumstances last season were crazy. And you mentioned it's a different locker room, it's a different team, but there are two constants from last year to this year: Nick Sirianni and poor decision making, which we saw again yesterday, and Jalen Hurts and the turnover issues, which we once again saw yesterday with 2 more turnovers. I don't see those things just ending anytime soon. I don't see Nick Sirianni all of a sudden making good decisions and Jalen Hurts all of a sudden not turning the football over when it's been a constant since week 1 of last year.
No, that's fair to say. I would say this team is more talented and better equipped to overcome some of those things, but you can't face that type of adversity every single week. Obviously, you don't want to win in spite of your head coach, but I think in terms of the turnovers with Jalen Hurts, I don't know if you can be coached out of some of those things, Andrew, but I think there are certain circumstances that you could, as a coach like Kellen Moore, sort of emphasize and have him be mindful of, maybe put him in better positions or take certain throws out of the equation, because you can't throw. That was another pass over the middle, Devontae. And yes, Devontae probably could have run a better route, could have gotten his hand in there, but Jalen can't throw that pass in that moment. But, I think situationally Sirianni obviously has to be a lot better, but fortunately for the Eagles, they were able to overcome that.
When you look at what Kellen Moore is doing, I look at it almost like through 3 games, it's been a little bit Kellen-less. Is that all A.J. Brown's absence, or is it something else that's maybe frustrating you?
Well, oddly enough, John, we go back to our patience discourse in the summer. I was less patient with the defense because of Vic Fangio, because they've been running variations of that scheme for the past few seasons, and a lot of those players are still there. But with Kellen Moore, you bring up an interesting point, because I do think that the offense hasn't had the same level of creativity that we envisioned or that we maybe even saw in week 1. But I think it could be a direct byproduct of not having A.J. Brown. But you might only be able to use that excuse for week 2, because now you've had a week to prepare without A.J. Brown, and there were certain things he did really well. Jalen had a good answer for the blitz. There was outlet receivers. There was motion. I thought that play, that crossing route to Dallas Goedert with 1:16 left on that 3rd and 16, where Goedert comes across and Jahan Dotson draws. He pulls up just in front of that linebacker, and it was just so well timed and everything. They're not making those plays last year. So you do see the innovation at times. It doesn't maybe look as you don't see the wholesale changes as maybe a lot may have expected 3 weeks in.
How well received do you think it is when Howie Roseman looks at the snap count and sees his big edge rusher playing 32% of the snaps? Deservedly so, by the way. But how well received do you think it is for Howie Roseman when he sees that this morning?
I'm pretty sure. I mean, I don't know how you guys felt, but watching that game, I'm like, I don't see Bryce Huff out here a lot. I can't wait to see.
I tweeted out yesterday. I said, honest question, has he done anything today? Like, I did not know. I wondered if I missed something.
He still doesn't have any stats, but he. I think Vic kind of took that into his own hands and opted not to play him as much and go with bigger-bodied linemen on the outside to really contain the edge and anchor. But I think if you're Howie Roseman, to answer your question, Andrew, you have to be a little bit. It's at the front of mind. It doesn't look great. The optics aren't great, especially when presumably Vic's free agent addition, Zach Vaughn, I'm sure he lobbied for him. He did play very well. He had another double-digit tackle game and was everywhere. And Howie's, the Eagles' big-ticket free agent addition, hasn't factored yet into the stat column. So I think you have to be a little bit self-aware, and it's probably eating away at you, I imagine, even 3 weeks in.
Tell me about the Dogs, because so much has been finger-pointed and otherwise, deservingly so, about the Georgia Bulldogs players not really living up to capabilities. What do you think about what you've seen out of them so far?
You know, I thought they answered the bell, at least on Sunday, John, really. Jordan Davis, to me, going into this, and you, me, and Andrew spoke about this earlier this week, I thought that Jordan Davis had to be and was the Eagles' most important defensive player because we looked at what Alvin Kamara was doing to teams. But he picked up a sack for the first time since last season against the Vikings. Jalen Carter, to me, was playing like a man possessed. He was disrupting the line of scrimmage. He was resetting the line of scrimmage, getting into the backfield. The Saints did not have an answer for him. Linebacker play was inspired. Zach Vaughn, Kobe Dean, they were everywhere. I think that was a direct byproduct of the defensive line play. Then the secondary was rangy. They got their hands on football. Reed Blankenship comes up with another takeaway. But for the Bulldogs, the Kobe Dean and Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter were exceptional.
Andrew, what can the Eagles do with Nick Sirianni? And I'm not saying firing the guy, but he is the head coach. He still has final say on decisions, like when to go for it, when not to go for it on fourth down. And he graded out like an F, in my opinion. You might have a different one. I think he failed yesterday as the head coach of the football team. Is there anything they can do? Is there anything that he can do differently?
It's tough because when you are the CEO, head coach, Andrew, your job description is to take that 30,000-foot view, take a step back, and be able to have your hand in everything. Run everything effectively. And you could argue that he's sort of regressed. It's been worse. It's been getting worse. I'm not exactly sure what you can do in that situation if you take even less responsibility from him. If you have a consultant where you have to run by certain decision making in critical moments by them, but there's not a lot that the Eagles can do right now. I think Nick maybe is getting a little heavy-handed. I think that might be fair to say based on some of the answers if we're able to infer. But they're going to have to figure that out. And through 3 weeks, I think that should be at the forefront and at the top of the list and things to work out.
Is the storyline of the week just going to be watching the injury report? Would you believe?
I have to think so. And by the way, you have to tip your cap to right guard Tyler Steen, right tackle Fred Johnson. It is so hard to come in mid-game, especially when you go through a week of practice where you're not getting first-team reps. You go out there, you execute at a high level. In that environment, I think that's. I mean, there's not much more you can say about that. Fred Johnson is one of the best stories on that Eagles roster, so he finally got his opportunity. But if Lane Johnson can't play, let's say, guys, Fred will be there. Ty Becton with the finger injury, that's something to keep an eye on. Devontae Smith with the concussion. Sometimes players clear that injury with at different timelines. But, for example, Johnny Wilson was out for over 2 weeks in the summer with that. So you never can really tell, but you have to keep an eye on that, especially with as many key players as the Eagles have that came out of that game with injuries, including Darius Slay, by the way.
I got one more for you, Andrew. And it's a conversation that we're going to get into later on in the show, but I'm curious to get your reaction to it. So they won the football game, and that's hard. Winning football games is not easily done. And Saquon Barkley talked about that yesterday. How long until that message runs dry in the locker room? And I'm not saying that as radio guy. It ran dry, last year in the locker room where they kept on saying, oh, well, we're winning football games. And then they got spanked by the Niners, and everything went awry after that. At what point do they realize, all right, we're not playing good enough football despite us winning football games?
I think with the new look locker room, Andrew, you have a little bit longer of a shelf life. Saquon Barkley, by the way, is a tremendous leader, so adding someone like that who isn't coming from a winning culture, Jalen Hurts is taking on more. You're going to have, I think the voices are going to resonate a little bit more this time to make sure that you don't go wide left. You don't let the season go to waste, because there were some players here that were in leadership roles that saw exactly how it went last season, and I have to believe that they're going to see it before it happens and be able to kind of nip it in the bud and make sure that it doesn't become an ongoing issue. But it's something that they're obviously going to have to be mindful of, because yes, they are 2-1. Probably shouldn't be. I mean, in some instances, but it's something to be mindful of given the circumstances that transpired last season.
Andrew, we appreciate it, man.
I'm telling you, DeCecco, you're really going places, man.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you're really impressive.